Hello YouTube, it's Tony. So today I'll do a loot from several ED1 kills and how good the profit per hour is. To start things off, no, I did not bug abuse the elite dungeons. Also, as a quick disclaimer, this is not an official guide but rather a quick rundown on how I do my runs. As such, unlike my other guides, I won't be going into full details. Now, I do have myself a raw footage which I'll leave the link in the description, or you can check out my VODs on Twitch. That being said, will I do a guide in the future? Yes, I definitely will, but right now I have no plans because I have to work on other guides first. Here is my equipment setup. I'm using a near best in slot range setup, which has Elite Serenic set. Then I have Eldritch and the perk I'm using is Caraming 4. After this, I have Fleeting Boots and Nightmare Gauntlets. Now I like to move with Snipe, although Cinderbanes are slightly better than this. The main bolts I'll be using are Ruby back bolts. Then for my main EOF, I have SGB, which is really expensive. Since I do player owned ports every day, I make my own superior Scrimshaw cruelties. The auras I would use are Maudrot, Inspiration, or Dark Magic. Moving on, we have the inventory setup. Other than the basic potions, I have Ceradomin Brews and Blubbers. The reason I use Blubbers is because they do not drain adrenaline, and although people suggest Guthix Rest, which are better because they don't drain either adrenaline or stats, I am more comfortable with Brews as they heal more. The yellow potion is called Power Burst of Acceleration, which is for moving around this dungeon faster. For the Dominion Mines, I'm using this at the Siriu Crystals. Mechanized Chinchapa and Offhand Blightbound is for clearing trash mobs. I will also use ED1 Lucky Charms, which you can buy from the Dungeoneering shop. I have a second EOF which has a Dark Bow spec in this. Then I have the Onyx Back Criminal Bolts, which is just for Masuda. Other utility items I brought are Excalibur, Ring of Vigor, Planted Feet Sunspear, and Disruption Shield Rune Pouch. In case anyone's wondering, I did not bring Luck of the Dwarf Switch because apparently it does not work at Elite Dungeons 1. So now I'm gonna explain to you how I personally learned ED1. Originally, I used the melee setup. I personally found ED1 harder to learn than ED2, but it's slightly easier to master than ED3. My biggest challenge when it comes to ED1 was the Siriu Shadow Hands mechanic, as when you're meleeing, you have a lot less room to work with. I remembered my first few kills were at least 10 to 15 minutes long because I was doing 3 cycles. When it comes to Siriu Crystals, the biggest challenge is trying to manage your burst DPS. Then for the trash mobs, my main struggle was they hit really hard just because they can use abilities, stuns, and bleeds. A lot of times I found the room before Masuda a nightmare because if you die before unlocking the barrier, you will have to run all the way back. What you're really trying to do is avoid aggroing these Death Lotus Rangers and DPSing these Cloak Zealots just in time. One advantage when it came to learning with melee is that I had Scrimshaw Vampirism, so I didn't have to worry about Soul Split flicking that much. So Tony, why do you use range nowadays? The main reason is because range has overall better DPS. Although this setup is really expensive, having greater ricochet inside Eldritch and Death's Witness absolutely tears apart bosses. I also don't have to work around using Zerk or Greater Barge or being at 100% adrenaline then Zerking and hoping that I don't accidentally click attack before I use Greater Barge. You get the idea. There are also more options to DPS since Eldritch is essentially like a second Death's Witness. With range, it just gives me more room to breathe, especially during the first and last boss. For the first boss, if I stood in the very back, I could dodge the water splash attack. For the last boss, I have way more breathing room, so that is really nice. As I said before, my biggest struggle with melee is the Shadow Hands mechanic. The problem with melee is that there's not much room to move, because if you're standing near the head, when the Shadow Hands spawn, you have a lot less time to react. Because of this, nowadays I rarely die with range. In all fairness, it is a little bit harder to learn with range if you don't understand the mechanics. Moving on, this is my strategy and walkthrough at Siriu. At the start of this kill, I would use Death's Witness, then 2 thresholds with Limitless. Where I personally stand is near the ledge so that I can dodge the Purple Breath attack. You don't want to stand too close because otherwise Shadow Hands will spawn right underneath you. Inside the ECB rotation, I would use good basics and thresholds, and this can pretty much rip apart Siriu's HP for the rest of the Death's Witness rotation. Just keep doing this, and whenever I see the claw attack instead of the magic attack, I can just move a few steps. With range, you have way more mobility, because otherwise you would have to cancel a channeled ability if you were to use melee setup. I would do this until 7.2 mil HP and then jump up the ledge. Immediately after jumping up, I would do an ECB rotation, and these are the following abilities I would use mainly: Greater Ricochet, Snipe, Rapid Fire, and Snapshot. You don't need to drop the minion mines, as I should be able to kill the first crystal before the healers spawn. You would have to use 2 ECB rotations in this case. Then for the second crystal, I would wait for the healers to arrive. Now, I would build to 100% adrenaline, then use Death's Witness so that I can build more adrenaline off of this. I don't personally drink an adrenaline potion since I could build adrenaline while waiting for the healers to spawn. After 2 hit splats of the Uber heal, I would activate Eldritch, then charge up Snipe. Release this into Greater Ricochet, then Rapid Fire and Snapshot, and after this with Spare Adrenaline, I would dump this on Darkbow EOF. Make sure you drop the minion mines before the 120k mark, or else this would not work. I would finish this off with strong basic abilities or keep DPSing until I get teleported down. Usually I should get this to around 10 to 30k HP, or I could kill it if I'm lucky with hit splats. When I get teleported down, I would use Freedom, then kill the healer blobs. After this, I would throw in a Death's Witness rotation. This is possibly the slowest part of the fight, which is why some people like to one cycle. It is a bit challenging as well because Shadow Hands will spawn more often. When I face this at 7.2 mil HP, I would jump up on either side of the ledge. I can finish off the low HP crystal by dumping 1 threshold. Otherwise, if I jumped up near the full HP crystal, I would use 2 ECB full rotations. This time I will drop the Dominion Mines. Pretty much I should be able to kill all the crystals before the healers arrive. Here are my average kill times with range. 115 at Sanctum Guardian, then for Masuda 345, and finally 430 at Siryu. Now that I've given you a quick breakdown on this, let's get into the loot. The chest value is almost 3.1 bill at the time of this screenshot. I don't remember how many lucky charms I used, and I didn't even keep track of the untradables like clue scrolls or summoning charms. I got a total of 3,072 ancient scales, 8,819 onyx dust, and 127.1 mil worth of coins and alkables. The alkables are reef relics, rune salvages, and suspicious gunpowder. Additionally, I received 61 Sirenic scales from the lucky charms, 15 fishy treats, and 14 Masuda war spears. For the untradables, I got myself 59k chimes and 34 Taijitsu. In the end, I was able to sell this loot for a little over 3.1 bill, or in ancient scales by itself, that is 2.46 billion. As for the small Menafite gift offerings, I didn't really get much off of this after opening 19 of them. Really, it's just 1 million loot, nothing that special. I mean, I suppose free charms or something. So now, the overall profit per hour. Unfortunately, I didn't keep track of how much it costed me in supplies. The average quantity per run was 14.2 ancient scales and 40 onyx dust. The amount of runs I did per hour was 3, and no, I didn't use fishy treat to skip. I struggled early on, but nowadays I can do 17-minute runs. In a total of 70 hours, I was able to do 216 full runs. Based on this loot, I would get myself a profit per hour of a whopping 44.3 million. Without the ancient scales, I would have still gotten 9 mil GP per hour. In the worst case scenario, if I got really unlucky, I would get 4 ancient scales per run and 15 onyx dust from the first and second boss. This means I would still get 11 million profit per hour. With that being said, is ED1 really worth it? I mean, I find this less difficult than Talos streaking or even ED3. Ancient scales will always be expensive due to how much demand there is, especially with Runescape. Over the course of 1 month while streaming this, I had a lot of fun doing ED1, so I'm not someone who gets bored easily just because I don't get a broadcasted drop. When it comes to comparing this with ED3 profit, this is way more consistent. I mean, the ED3 commons are just extremely bad, and you're really only hoping for an ECB piece at the last boss. Also, the other 2 bosses have very terrible drops. It's also easier to master ED1 because the dungeons are shorter. In comparison to other bosses, this does not require Zerker auras, so that means you can pretty much farm a lot of Marks of War this way. Not to mention that Elite Sarenic does not degrade in Elite Dungeons, so there is less need to worry about charge costs. Then again, there is one huge disadvantage, and that is, there is no broadcasted drop from ED1. It's like you're really relying on a huge ancient skill drop quantity, that's it really. So yeah, thanks for watching and I hope it helps. If I missed anything, feel free to ask. Also, be sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already, because I will do more loot videos like this in the future.